Picture this. It's 1935, and a country suddenly vanishes from world maps. A nation whose name, Persia, has echoed for thousands of years, a name synonymous with legendary kings, sprawling empires, and tales of exotic splendor is just gone, and a deep-seated battle for the soul of a nation. That name is a hand-me-down from the ancient Greeks, who first bumped into the rising power from the east in the 6th century BCE. They built the famous Royal Road, a highway connecting their vast lands, and set up a remarkably efficient postal system. Within the borders of this vast land, its people used a different name, one that was far older and hit much closer to home. The name comes from the Avestan term Aryanum Veja, which means homeland of the Aryans, a phrase found in the sacred texts of Zoroastrianism. Now, it's important to understand that Aryan here referred to a shared linguistic and cultural heritage of the Indo-Ionian peoples who settled on the plateau around 2000 BC. Had nothing to do with the racial concepts of the 20th century. The Sassanid Empire fell, and over time, Islam became the dominant religion. The land of Iran became a global hub of learning and innovation. They re-centralized the state, and under their rule, art and architecture reached stunning new heights, especially in their magnificent capital, Isfahan. The Safavids solidified a state that was distinctly Iranian, paving the way for the modern nation. But as their power began to fade, the land once again found itself caught between great powers, setting the stage for a major identity crisis. Reza Shah's government sent out a formal request to foreign diplomats. From now on, please stop using the name Persia in official business and use the country's actual name Iran. First, it was a bold declaration of national sovereignty. By insisting on the name its people used, Reza Shah was signaling a clean break from the colonial baggage and the orientalized stereotypes tied to Persia. He was symbolically slamming the door on an era of foreign domination. Second, it was about unity. Persia technically only referred to one ethnic group in one region, Pars. However, the word Persian is alive and well, used mostly in a cultural and historical sense, but about the world finally learning what it was called all along. The 1935 decree wasn't an invention, it was a reclamation. It was a powerful declaration that the nation's identity would no longer be defined by outsiders, but by its own people and their long, proud history. We talk about Persian carpets, Persian cats, Persian literature, and the Persian language, Farsi. Persia evokes that ancient pre-Islamic grandeur, while Iran refers to the modern, multifaceted nation-state. In 1959, the government officially announced that both names could be used interchangeably, a nod to the rich, dual heritage that both words represent. But the name Iran, meaning land of the Aryans, was more inclusive of the country's diverse ethnic makeup, which included Kurds, Azuris, Lurs, and many others. This was a powerful, deliberate act of reclaiming their identity. To the revolutionaries who redefined the state in the 20th century, the thread of Iranian identity has remained unbroken. It's a story of epic twists and powerful kings. But it's also a story of a resilient culture and an ancient name, finally spoken loud and clear for the whole world to hear. The journey from Persia to Iran is the story of a civilization that always knew who it was, and in the 20th century chose to reintroduce itself to the world on its own terms. Thinkers like Avicenna and Al-Razi revolutionized medicine. Mathematicians pushed the limits of algebra and trigonometry, and poets like Rumi and Hafez created works of transcendent beauty that are still celebrated around the globe. For Reza Shah, Persia was the past. Iran was the future, modern nation-state ready to take its rightful place on the world stage. It's a great reminder that names have power, and history is almost always more complex than we're told. If you find these hidden histories as fascinating as we do, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss our next deep dive into the stories that shaped our world. The reaction from the West was mostly confusion and, in some cases, outright dismissal. The British Foreign Office reportedly found the request a bit silly. During World War II, Winston Churchill even asked if they could temporarily go back to using Persia to avoid confusion with neighboring Iraq, a request that was granted just for the war. Their language was Persian, and their homeland was Iran. But something remarkable happened. While the region adopted a new faith, it didn't lose its identity. Reza Shah's son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, continued his father's modernization efforts with his White Revolution. But his autocratic rule and cozy relationship with the West stirred up widespread discontent. This all boiled over in the 1979 Islamic Revolution, an event that reshaped the nation's identity all over again. The monarchy was abolished, and the Islamic Republic of Iran was established, led by Ayatollah Khomeini. In fact, this period kicked off an era of Persianization, where Persian culture, language, and ways of administration became fundamental to the new Islamic world. The country was basically a pawn in the great game, a geopolitical chess match between the British and Russian empires. Both powers carved out spheres of influence and greedily exploited the nation's resources, including its newly discovered oil. The name Persia started to become associated with this era of decline, corruption, and foreign meddling. For many Iranian nationalists, the name used by the West now felt tainted, a symbol of weakness and submission. This name Iran wasn't just poetic. It signified a collective identity, a unifying idea for all the diverse peoples of the land. Inspired by modernizers like Turkey's Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, he seized power in 1921, and by 1925, he had deposed the last Qajar Shah and crowned himself Reza Shah Pahlavi, founding a new dynasty. His vision was crystal clear. He wanted to build a strong, modern, secular, and fiercely independent nation. To do that, he felt the country needed to show a new face to the world, or, more accurately, a very old one. They were also known for a policy of cultural tolerance most famously demonstrated when Cyrus freed the Jewish people from their captivity in Babylon. For centuries, the name Persia became a brand for immense power and cultural sophistication. The Sassanid Empire, which rose up in the 3rd century CE and brought back Persian power after centuries of Greek and Parthian rule, officially named their state Iransha the Empire of the Iranians. Their kings even used the title Ichihang-Ern, or King of Kings of Iran. So while the Romans and the rest of the Western world were talking about Persia, the inhabitants themselves, from kings to poets, were talking about Iran. This two-name situation went on for more than 1,500 years. The world saw Persia, but the people felt Iran. It was a constant thread of identity that ran through invasions, dynastic shifts, and religious transformations. Even after Alexander the Great's conquest shattered the Achaemenid dynasty, the name stuck. The empires that rose from the ashes, like the Parthians and the Sasanians, were locked in a centuries-long struggle with Rome, a true clash of ancient superpowers. In the Western mind, Persia was the name for this great Eastern rival, a land of epic poems, intricate carpets, and powerful kings. They called it Persis, named after the region of Pars, what we now call Fars province. This was the heartland of the people who would build the largest empire the world had ever seen. Under the visionary leadership of Cyrus the Great, the Achaemenid Empire exploded across the ancient world, stretching all the way from the Balkans to the Indus Valley. You see, what the world knew as Persia, its own people had been calling Iran for centuries. This is the untold story of that name, a journey through a forgotten history that reveals how the empire of Cyrus the Great became the modern state of Iran. This quite of this wasn't because of a war or a national collapse. It was a simple decree. The nation of Persia was to be known by a different name, Iran. But this was no simple rebranding. It was the climax of a story thousands of years in the making, a story of two names. One civilization, for most of the world, the story has always started with Persia. The Achaemenids weren't just conquerors, they were master administrators and innovators. But here's the twist. This was an exonyma name given by outsiders, and that name was Iran. Its origins are woven into the deepest layers of the region's history, long before the Persian Empire even existed. This wasn't just a cultural term, it was a political reality. The 7th century brought one of the biggest changes in the nation's history, the Islamic conquest. This fusion sparked an incredible cultural blossoming known as the Islamic Golden Age. Later on, the Safavid dynasty, which came to power in 1501, added another layer to the national identity by making Shia Islam the state religion. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the ruling Qajar dynasty had become weak and corrupt. This climate of national humiliation set the stage for a military officer named Reza Khan. The big moment came on March 21, 1935, the Persian New Year. Why did he do it? Well, there were a few key reasons. Finally, it was a modernizing statement. This journey from Persia to Iran is a powerful story of how a nation can reclaim its identity. The name change was just one piece of a very turbulent century for Iran. Today, the two names exist side by side in a really interesting way. Politically and officially, the country is Iran. The story of Persia and Iran isn't really about a country changing its name. From the Achaemenid kings, who founded one of antiquity's greatest empires, to the brilliant scholars of the Golden Age who enlightened the world,